Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get our program started today. Good morning. Welcome, everybody. We're so happy that you're here with us this morning. My name is Dr. Megan Stidd. I'm the Assistant Dean for External Relations in the UCCS College of Business. One of my roles is to oversee our Office of Professional and Executive Development, which is why I'm here with you today. So we're excited to have you with us for another business briefing. And before we begin, I want to take just a moment to talk about the partnership between UCCS and the Chamber and EDC. So the goal of the business briefings is to bridge the gap between research and application. So we identify a faculty member at UCCS who is well versed in current research and application. And then we also identify a chamber member who is actively engaged in the area of interest. So this overlap between research and application provides you with a unique and comprehensive perspective on the topic at hand, which today happens to be securing capital for your business. Lastly, I want to give you just a brief overview of the offerings available through our UCCS Office of Professional and Executive Development, which we call OPED. So through our OPED program, we offer training programs to local businesses. So this can be a program customized to the needs of your business, or we also offer open enrollment programs to individuals seeking professional development opportunities. So whatever your training needs are, we are certainly here to help you with that. And I am more than happy to talk to anyone who is interested in that opportunity. I would now like to turn it over to the CEO of the Chamber and EDC, Dirk Draper, who will introduce today's topic and our speakers. Dirk?
Thank you, Megan. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you to UCCS, all your folks there, and the partnership we have with these business briefings. They've been well received, and I'll tell you what, I cannot think of a more timely topic given the events in our nation, in our region's economy in the last 3 or 4 months. 35 years ago, I started my professional career as a banker, and as such, dealt in capital lending sources and so forth. And I have never seen a time when access to capital has been more critical for a business community than it is right now. In the early days of the pandemic, I saw a solid piece in the Wall Street Journal, actually. It talked about the 3 things that businesses needed most during the early days of the pandemic. Included immediate access to working capital, long-term capital for their financial stability during the turbulence, and then just communications about information, what was changing in policy and direction as the COVID pandemic unfolded. So today's topic continues to be very timely as companies navigate both public and private sources of capital to stay liquid and solvent during these days. We have 2 excellent speakers, well versed in the topic of securing capital for your business. Our first speaker this morning is Chris Cipoletti. Chris is a founder of the Pioneer Fund, which provides private equity capital in the Pikes Peak region. He's also the principal consultant for Cipoletti Consulting. In that role, he helps provide strategic and business planning, organizational development, leadership and management training, and more. Chris has served as the executive director of a national nonprofit. He's been an adjunct faculty member for Regis University in its global leadership program. And he's a private practice attorney. And in what little spare time is left, Chris also serves as the president of Pikes Peak Public Market, and he's the vice chair of the Colorado Springs Leadership Institute board. With this really diverse background, Chris brings a unique perspective to his practice, and combining both legal skills with the management expertise and experience that he has developed through the years. Chris holds a BA, a Bachelor's of Arts in General Programs of Liberal Studies from the University of Notre Dame, and received his law degree from the Notre Dame Law School. It's Chris Cipoletti, and he'll be our first speaker. Chris, it's nice to see you again this morning. Scott Van Ness will be the second speaker. Scott is an instructor of operations management at UCCS, where he teaches courses in operations and supply chain management, quantitative methods, and service management. His subjects are core courses required of all students pursuing degrees in the College of Business at the university. Before coming to UCCS, Scott spent more than 25 years in industry in the field of supply chain management and distribution operations. He's also a veteran of the Air Force, where he served 21 years, retiring as a rank of Lieutenant Colonel. Thank you for your service, Scott. Scott currently owns and operates multiple small businesses. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's the CEO of Biz Lending Pro. It's a national commercial brokerage specializing in all aspects of commercial lending. He's also the owner of Van Ness Lean Six Sigma Consulting. He holds professional certifications as a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt and a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. Folks, you're in for a treat. You got two subject matter experts who are going to share perspectives on their take on securing capital for your business. Chris, I'll turn it over to you. Gents, thank you both for joining us this morning. And Chris, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Dirk. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with everybody. We've got a small but powerful group this morning. So if anything comes up as Scott and I are walking through the presentation, please feel free to put something in the chat, and we'll try to answer your questions as we go forward. And there will be an opportunity kind of at the end of each of our sections to have some Q&A. So we'll have plenty of time for dialogue. But before we get started with the presentation, we wanted to get a sense of who's in the Zoom room with us. So Emma, if you could post the first poll, and we're going to ask you just basically about the size of your business so that we have an understanding of what your needs may be. So can everybody see the poll results? It looks like we've got some diversity here. We've got predominantly folks under $250,000 in annual revenue, but we've got one between $500,000 and $1 million, and one that's between $2.5 and $5 million. So we'll really look at all of the different ways that we can talk about access to capital from both traditional commercial opportunities as well as private investment. So I'm going to share my screen, and we'll walk through a presentation that we've got. Can everyone see that? Great. So today we're talking about securing capital. And one of the things that is really important when we talk about securing capital is being prepared before you go in and ask. And so the first section of our presentation today is really going to talk about what kind of preparation you need as you are as you're seeking or looking to secure capital. And one of the things that I think is incredibly important is a business plan. Now, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be incredibly complex, but it needs to cover a certain amount of information, because most banks, most people who might be investors, most investment funds, they want to see your business plan. They want information about you, and your business plan is the best place to provide that information. So what are we looking for? We need to talk about what our business model is. Right? In great part, that's what do you do? Right? What business are you in? How do you function as a business? How do you make your money? Give a background on who you are. If funders, lenders don't know who you are, they're going to be hesitant to provide you with any kind of funding. So make sure that you've got your business model laid out and you can tell people what it is that you do.
Hey, Chris, I'm going to jump in for a second here. And I think even if you've been in business for a long time and you might be very, very good at this, you may not have gone through the exercise of explaining what you do, how you do it. It just becomes day to day. And so it's a good exercise we find to go through to be able to explain what you do. It's something we tell our students about, making that 30-second elevator speech. We we talk to them a lot about, you need to be able to do this. And if you haven't done this in a while with a company, even if you're very, very good at what you do, even if you're a market leader, it's some muscles you need to exercise that maybe you haven't done in a while.
And that's, Scott, that's a great point, right? Because if you don't have your, as you know, lots of people talk about, if you don't have your elevator pitch down, if you can't tell somebody what you do, it's really hard to ask for money. It's hard to ask for anything to support your business if you can't explain to people what you do. The next thing you really need to look at is, what do you really need? How much money do you need for whatever plan you've got for your business? Whether it is around growth, whether it's around development of a new product line, whatever you're looking for funding for, you need to know how much you need, which means, and your business plan should really kind of give you that indication, right? What do you need to invest? And then that flows right into, how are you going to use the funding? Right? Are you looking for growth? Are you looking to develop a new product line? Are you looking to add staffing to help handle overflow? What is the money going to be used for? Because, you know, obviously nobody wants to fund your business so that you can go and buy your next vacation home. What they're looking for is something that's going to help your business grow or be more successful, and so you need to explain what that funding is going to be used for. And you're going to need to present financials, right? What's your budget look like? If you're looking for funding because you're a failing business, you're going to have much more difficulty than if you're looking for funding because you're looking to grow. So think about what your budget is, and how you're going to use your funding. Those are key things that any investor, whether it's a bank, whether it's a private equity fund, whether it's a venture capital fund, any investor is going to look at what you do and what you're looking to use the money for.
All right, I'm going to jump in again, Chris, and it was a good point on funding and getting into what you need. And so some things you might want to think about is, because you're going to need to produce these things going forward. And things that we've seen folks struggle with is getting 3 years of bank statements ready, P&L statements, tax returns. And if you haven't filed, those are things that you definitely want to look at. So make sure that those boxes are checked before you go into this process, because regardless of who you are trying to get money from, you're trying to get funding through, you're going to need to have these nuts and bolts squared away before you go forward.
Yeah, and that is the whole preparation piece, right? If you're not prepared if you're not prepared to make a presentation, people are going to know that, right? Funders are going to know that you're not ready to ask for money, and so you're shooting yourself in the foot if you don't have everything lined up before you step in and make an ask. Part of asking or being prepared to ask is also kind of, who are your customers, right? And how do you acquire those customers? We're talking about what your business is now, right? You have to assume that when you're sitting down with somebody, whether it's friends or family, whether it's a banker, whether it's an investment firm, that they don't really know you, and they don't know your business. You know your business better than anybody else, so you need to be prepared to talk about who your customers are and how you acquire them, because that's going to help us, as we look at your business, understand, if I lend you money, if I invest in your business, will I make money off of it, right? If you don't know who your customers are, if you don't know how you're acquiring your customers, you can't articulate that, it's going to be a real challenge for somebody to say, I want to lend you money, I want to fund your business. Likewise, you need to look at your competition, right? You need to be prepared to talk about who your competition is, because that's a big issue, right? If you're stepping into a product line where you've got serious competition and you haven't identified who that competition is and how you're different from your competition, again, it's going to be really difficult for anybody to look at funding you. I want to know who you're going up against and how you distinguish yourself. So this is a really important piece, right? It's the being prepared to talk about where you're going, because this is what's going to make you successful. If you don't have an advantage over your competition, then you probably are not going to get much funding. You may not have competition, right? You may come up with a brand new novel idea. At that point, you need to be thinking about, how is it that I'm going to make money off of it, right? How am I going to capitalize it? And your competition may be the doubters that you've even got a great idea, right? So you got to be prepared to talk about those kinds of issues as you really are getting ready to step in and talk about getting funding for your business.
I got one last point on this too. If you've gone through this exercise recently, recommend you do it again in terms of what post-COVID is going to look like. We're just coming out of this. What's that going to look like 6 months from now? Where are your customers? Did they go somewhere? And are you prepared to get them back?
And the big thing is what you want to do, and I see that we left out a word on the slide, but be prepared to make yourself stand out when talking with lenders or investors, right? You've got to shine when you are in front of a group of people or an individual talking about your business and your business's needs as you're looking at asking for capital. So these are some of the essentials around planning. And as we said, there's no magic formula. There's no format that you have to plug things into, but these are the major issues that you need to be looking at to be prepared as you step forward and want to look at funding for your business. So maybe if we could, are there any questions at this point that anybody has?
Let's keep rolling.
See if not seeing any. Okay. So we'll jump in then to really look at. Excuse me for a second. My screen is. So let's talk now about what the resources are that are available for you as you look at seeking funding. And there's a variety of resources that are out there. Once you know what you really need and you can justify getting somebody to lend you money or invest in your business, you need to know who you're going to ask, right? So one of the first and best places is to connect with people with whom you have relationships. If your needs are not great, or if you've got friends and family who have some disposable capital, that may be a great place to start. Right? Friends and family can believe in you, they can support you. You're going to need to explain to them, just like you would to a bank, to a credit union, to an investment fund, what you need. All of the preparation work that we talked about, you're going to need to explain that to them. But when you've got that personal relationship, it makes it much easier to make a request when you're talking with friends and family and seeking their input and their support of your business. They know you, they like what you're doing, they see the value in it. The same thing can be true with banks, bankers, or credit unions, mostly those with whom you work, right? Especially in this environment where credit is becoming tighter. If you don't have a relationship with a bank or with bankers or with a credit union, it's going to be very difficult for you to walk in and make a request out of kind of a cold call request. Now, when we talk about having a relationship with banks, with bankers, with credit unions, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be banking with them right but it's people you know in the industry. So if your next door neighbor is a friend and works for one of the local banks, there's no reason not to talk with that person because they know you. But when you've got a relationship, it makes it much easier to get your foot in the door and start having the conversation. You can also go to private lenders, to investors, and these are going to be less traditional, right? When we talk about banks and credit unions in particular, those are more traditional loans. And when you start looking into the private lending market, you may be able to find some loans, but you're also going to be looking at entities that are looking to invest in your business. They want to take a piece of it. So you could look at venture capital funds. Venture capital funds really are generally going to invest in high-tech businesses these days, and they're looking for a very high return. You're going to have to show that you're gonna hit a home run on the success of your business and your growth plan to get venture capital funds to step in. Private equity funds are interested, again, in investing rather than lending. They aren't looking so much for that really, really high growth. They're looking for steady growth. They are looking to step into businesses that have really good opportunity that can beat investing in the market. So if I can make 5 to 10% on my investments in the traditional stock market, a private equity fund is going to be looking to make 15, 20, 25% on their return, or return on their investment.
So I'm going to jump in real quick on the private lenders. Another advantage that we have there is a lot of the banks will not lend right now unless you have 2 years in business. Some of the private lenders will lend if you have less than a year, and they do so because they're willing to work with alternative credit and collateral. Some of the lenders, and there's a ton of specialty lenders out there, will lend on inventory. Some will lend on contracts. If you get a contract, a government contract, maybe you don't have the capital yet, they'll lend against that, or even accounts receivable. You will most likely pay higher interest rates with the private lenders, but it can be worth it depending on your business situation if the profits are going to produce. So there are opportunities out there, and even in some markets that didn't exist a couple years ago. So that opportunity is there in addition to the banks.
Yeah, and Scott, that's a good point, right? Those are lending options, not so much investment options necessarily, but at higher rates. Factoring, many of you might have heard of factoring. That's one of those functions that somebody holds your accounts receivable, and they pay themselves back based on a contract you've got and the accounts receivable that you're collecting. But they take a higher rate, and it may be worth it, right? When you see a really good opportunity and you need capital for growth, that very well may be worth paying a higher rate to be able to get that capital, especially if you can't get traditional bank financing. One of the other options that you can look at, hedge funds. Hedge funds generally they're hedging their bets. They're looking for a maximum return with a minimum risk. Right, so you can't be you can't have much risk in terms of what you're trying to do, and there has to be a good opportunity for a strong return on the investment.
And a lot of the hedge funds are going to look for collateral, and they will sometimes see if you've got property to use that. So there is some risk in there doing that, but they're looking to hedge their risk, and heavy collateral kind of makes them feel better about dropping money into an opportunity.
That's a good point, right? So if you're a manufacturing business with lots of high-end equipment, you've got more collateral than if you're a service business, and you've got your computer and your software programs and maybe a desk and a conference room table, right? So looking at collateral is something that everybody's going to look at. What do I have of value that supports my business. And the more collateral you have, the easier it is to find funding, because particularly traditional funding, because banks are looking for collateral. Another option that you can look at is working with an investment bank. Investment banks will put deals together. They'll go out, they may find some equity, they may find some debt. The debt is usually a much higher rate than you could get if you could get a traditional commercial loan right now. And if you went to a bank right now to get a commercial loan, if you've got the right collateral, you could probably get something at 4 to 5%. If you're working with an investment bank, you're probably looking at debt at 12 to 13, maybe 15%. And so significant differential in terms of what the traditional banking system will do versus what investment banks might be able to do to put a deal together for you. And as you can see, with private lenders or investors, you can expect a lot of oversight. They expect a high return on their investment. They want ownership in the business oftentimes, and with that ownership, they may want majority, and they certainly want control and a big say, because they view themselves as being more than your partner, definitely your partner, and sometimes your boss. So that's just something you have to look at when you're looking at where is it that you might want to place your, you might want to look for sources of funding. So Emma, why don't we, if you don't mind, throw up the next poll. This is just kind of what type of funding are you most comfortable with? So it looks like we've got a fair amount of folks who are very comfortable with friends and family, loans, traditional loans. A couple people who are willing to take a risk, which is great. So once we're there, once we've kind of made a decision about where we want to go looking for funding, then we have to start talking about how do we ask, right? And this can be one of the most difficult things to do. So when we ask, you have to be prepared. It can be very nerve-wracking. Even if you're great as a public speaker, you're now doing one of the hardest things that you will do, and that is going in and asking for money. You know who you want to approach? Now you have to do the approach. And you need to really know who your audience is and what's going to motivate them to get them to say yes. Now, we say to get them to say yes. One of the things that I'll just throw out here right up front before we really start talking about how do you make that ask is you want to get an answer, right? That's one of the most important things when you're asking for funding. You don't want to spend 90 days trying to convince somebody to fund your business only to get to no, right? And you don't want to spend 90 days trying to get to yes either. So you want to get to an answer relatively quickly. Because if it's a yes or a no, you at least have an answer, and then you can move on to the next opportunity, whether it's the next bank on your list, the next set of friends, the next investment fund. Get an answer quickly, and don't let the ask drag out. Now, when you're talking about asking friends and family for money, it really is about relationships. Right? That's what drives those requests. And so you have to demonstrate that you've got a level of confidence that you're going to be successful. And you have to show them your return on investment. Even with friends and family, they want to know that if I give you $10,000 to support your business, then I'm doing it as a loan or as an investment, I'm going to get that $10,000 back, and I'm going to get more than that $10,000 back, right? You've got to show that there is a return. You might have heard about social return on investment. That is, it's a big move these days. And even when you're looking at a social return on investment, people also, when they invest in businesses, expect a financial return on investment. And when you're working with friends and family, it generally is both a social return, they want to support you, and a financial return. They're putting money into your business to help you, but they expect to get their money back, and they expect to make a profit off of their investment in you.
So quick note on friends and family. A lot of times these discussions about funding with friends and family will drift into the area of partnerships. Sometimes it's a natural thing, and advice we give on partnerships is be very careful who you partner with. It's like getting married, and we know a lot of marriages end up in divorces, and a lot of partnerships, I think more than half of them end up in litigation. And so that's got to be something you really, really want to make sure you're going to do. I would recommend, the loan, paying that back, being sure you can do that before you go into partnership, because if you do have to sever the partnership, if the partnership isn't laid out really well, and a lot of times with friends and family, they're not laid out as well as they should be, whether if it was somebody who wasn't close to you, you're going to end up in court, and you're going to pay legal fees what you would have paid just to get a loan somewhere else, to get funding elsewhere. So just really, really be careful if you find that drifting into partnership, because it's like a marriage, and you want to make sure you choose wisely in both those areas, partnership.
Scott, that's a great point, right? Because it is, you have relationships with your friends and family when you step in, and going into business with friends and family, whether it's through a loan, whether it's with a partnership, can be very, very risky, because it can damage and break those relationships when things don't go the way they're planned. And particularly with friends and family, you have to assume that things are probably not going to go as planned. Maybe they'll go better, but they very well may go worse, and usually they do, right? There's expectations, there's relationships that exist for a long time that are brought into those businesses. So be cautious with those. And if you're going to do friends and family, loans are probably the best way to go rather than partnerships. When you look at banks and credit unions, the traditional places that we think about going for funding, it really these days is about regulations. For those of you who were in business coming out of the Great Recession, or you'd go to a bank and you would ask for a loan, and they would tell you, you ask for $100,000, and they would say, well, do you have collateral? And if you say, yeah, I've got collateral, well, they wanted very liquid collateral. So to give you $100,000, they wanted you to put $100,000 in a depository account in the bank, and they would hold that while they lent you money. Well, if I've got $100,000 in liquid cash, why would I borrow, right? That's what a lot of people were feeling. But banks and credit unions, they've softened a bit, but it's very much about regulations. They're highly regulated entities, and so they have to follow lots of rules. So when you're working with banks and credit unions, right, you need to have a relationship with somebody so that they can be a champion for you when it goes to a credit committee or a loan committee. But much of what you need to do is you need to fill out the forms correctly. Right? Give them the information that they're looking for. When Scott was talking about being prepared, right, having your tax returns, having your financials, making sure that they're accurate and they're clean, you're going to be asked for a lot of information. You're probably going to have to personally guarantee a loan with a bank or a credit union, especially if you're a smaller business. And one of the biggest things that banks and credit unions are going to be looking for is to see how you're going to service your loan. Right? How is it that you're going to be able to pay the debt that you're taking on? So pay back both the principal and the interest that the bank is charging you to allow you to use their money. So those are really crucial things with banks and credit unions, right? It really is very much about making sure all the boxes are checked properly and that all of the information that is needed is provided. Because if you're not doing that, you're going to slow the process down. And if you're hesitating to provide information, your banker might think, what is it you're trying to hide, right? And you don't want that at all when you're dealing with banks and credit unions. When you're working with private lenders, with investors, it really ends up being all about the return on investment. Right? These are organizations that are looking to make money. And they're looking to make a good amount of money off of your business, right? So you probably you have to have a pitch deck usually, right? And it needs to be a quality pitch deck. It shows your business. It shows a solid return on investment, right? What can I expect to make? It talks about who's involved, right? If I'm investing in your company, I want to know who I'm investing in. I'm probably not so much investing in your business as I am investing in your team, who I think can execute well on your business plan. I need to see how you distinguish yourself from your competition, really how you set yourself apart, so that I know that if you've got competition, that people will look at you seriously rather than just being one more business fighting for a limited market. And then I need to know how I'm going to get paid back, right? If I've invested in your business, how are you going to buy me out? Are we going to sell the business? Are you going to build a new revenue stream and then have the ability to finance to buy me out? But how am I getting out? Because it is about a return on investment. Regardless of what you're looking for, regardless of your source of funding, people, banks, investors, they all want to know how they're going to get paid back. How are they making money by lending you money or investing in your business?
I want to add a couple things in here real quick, and this is on overstating and understating. And one thing that we have seen a lot of times with the ROI is we come in, and especially if we're going to factor or we're going to loan against accounts receivable, we might overinflate our ROI. You got to be really careful about that. Banks and lenders are now checking what the average income is in your field versus where you're at. And if that doesn't match, you're going to go to the bottom of the pile. You got to make sure that that's there. So be careful about that. I think a lot of us are very positive people. We expect good things to happen, but if you're showing your ROI is just 50% higher than the competition, that's going to make somebody balk. On the other hand, distinguish yourself from your competition. What I've seen is people underinflate in that area. You're probably doing something really, really neat, really wonderful, and you want to make sure that's there. And I think maybe we won't do that about ourselves sometimes. So make sure you get those right. I'd rather see you underinflate your ROI versus the other way and flip the other one on number 4 there. But those are really good points in getting you to go forward.
One of the other things that you need to think about when you're talking with funders is what's your credit history, right? And what are your partners, your team's credit history, right? Does somebody have a bankruptcy? Have you defaulted on a loan, right? Even if you've done that, it might make it a little bit more difficult to convince somebody to lend you money or to invest in your business, but don't hide it, right? Put it out there. Put all your warts out there so that nobody finds them out halfway into the discussion when somebody's ready to make a commitment. You think they're ready to sign on the dotted line, and then all of a sudden something negative comes up, right? Make sure that you're being upfront and honest with all of the good and the bad in terms of what you're bringing to the table. Because if you've been in business for 10 years or more, you've had some problem most likely, right? And so just put it out there. People understand. They, you know, if you're hiding it, they won't understand. But if you put it out there, they'll understand.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I have seen numerous loans just blow up right at the end, because there's a tax lien or something comes up, or somebody decided to buy a bunch of furniture. And it's pretty infuriating at our end, because we've put a lot of work in at this point. So, and the thing is, it always gets found. Nowadays, and maybe years ago, things could slip through, but there's probably something out there that you don't know about, and you're better off, showing your cards. We can deal with that. It's when it doesn't happen, then it doesn't smell right, and then the lenders are going to go away. So just be careful and expect that there's going to be a nasty thing out there as you start opening up drawers, looking through files. It's very easy for a tax lien or something to slip through, and that just slams the brakes on everything.
And as we said a little earlier, the markets are tighter, particularly in the traditional banking markets, right? With the coronavirus pandemic, the amount of money that has been put out in the PPP loans that banks are managing, right? Banks and credit unions are looking very cautiously at business deals, simply because we're not sure where the economy is right now. So you may have a little bit more struggle in finding that traditional financing. On the flip side, the markets have been volatile, and private lenders are looking for opportunities that give them a confidence level of a solid return. And so they are out there. There are people out there looking to invest, lend some of their money on solid businesses. So if you can show you've got a really, really solid idea and a good business plan that will carry you forward, there are opportunities and there is funding out there to help you secure capital for your growth plans and to move your business to the next level.